Uh, all right, so this week we're going to talk kettlebells as always, and we have invited Coach Rich Alvarez from New York City, where they don't make the best salsa, but they do have a good kettlebell scene. Real quick, Rich, give us like your 15 seconds of fame real quick, just a quick synopsis, and then we're going to dive right in.
Yeah, man. Based out of the city, obviously. Got into kettlebells about 2017. I was kind of in the CrossFit powerlifting scene, and then made a transition just through a job opportunity, and then realized this is really cool tool. And I never really knew the kettlebell. Slowly started meeting people through the fitness industry, and then I met Samantha, who's my girlfriend, who's in SFG. Kind of went through the SFG, like leading up to the cert. Hire trainers, blah blah, take the cert. And then from there, this kettlebell thing in my life just kind of exploded. And then you realize how big, even though it's a small community, how big it is and how many peers. And so since then, it's just kind of been my main go-to with clients and stuff. And personal training, most of my clients see the stuff I post, and it's more like task and skill oriented with them and getting stronger in that element. But yeah, that's kind of it. Pretty straightforward. Yeah,
that's perfect.
That's kind of it.
Yeah. Perfect. Right into our question. What are you absolutely obsessed with right now, movement wise or whatever? What gets you really excited about kettlebells?
It's versatility. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us would say the same. I think even the slightest regression, the lowest regression of teaching the deadlift to someone, oftentimes you'll see trainers in gyms just botch someone straight to like a barbell, or even a trap bar is good, but the heaviest kettlebell in the gym could take weeks for a client to learn and, perfect. And the fact that it's such a versatile tool, from that to then teaching the power aspect that I think we all really love about the bell. So anything from the basic foundation of just strength movements to then the power development to then the technique and the skill. But right now, my current obsession, and it's always been, is the double kettlebell clean. That is I think it's the most beautiful expression of power. The snatches as well, but I think double kettlebell clean to me, it's always been. I'm currently working on double 44s, making that like my go-to and like as clean as I can. So yeah, that's my current obsession with kettlebells.
What is it about the double clean?
There's a lot of things. It's a big question to unpack. But I think when I look at kettlebells, I look at it as kind of multiple aspects, but in my mind, it's an art, right? So whenever you look at someone and you're like, damn, they move well. And it's like, what about them moves well? Like how easy they can make something look, make heavyweight look pretty light. Their understanding of the movement and what they're really doing, right? So are they just getting weight up, or do they really understand, you could talk physics or anything like that, but do they really understand how they're doing what they're doing? So when it comes to the double kettlebell clean, from the hike to the hip extension, to the elbow, to the fast hands, to the catch, to the drop, to the hinge, to the second rep, like there's so many components to it. And you really see people do it, but then you rarely see, you see fewer people do it like, damn, that's gorgeous. Like that's a nice movement, like they really are doing that the way it should be. And so that's kind of like when you break it down to so many things, and it's easy to kind of look at certain clients and trainers and be like, oh, if only they worked on this part, that part would be better. Or, I don't want to get too much into that, but that's kind of why.
What do you look for? Because this is a common thing with coaches. We talk about improvements, we talk about drills and ways to get people better. But the common point of departure that a lot of people aren't entirely sure about is, what are you looking for? How do you know a clean is successful? What are your specifics? What are you looking for? Like, we have very specific things that we'll say, okay, this is a clean, this is an okay clean, this is a good clean. We've got very specific things that we're looking for. What does a good clean look like? Single, double, heavy, whatever.
Well, starting at the most basic dead clean, it's a vertical movement, right? So even though I'm looking for a proper hinge, I'm really looking for vertical power, whatever the best way to say that is, right? So starting from the setup, I think we could all agree, proper hinge. You know, there are some of the guys here in the city who would prefer more of a quad dominant. So like, you know, we talk about the deadlift being the foundation of all things, taking that hip hinge, the hip and knees, and just shifting it under a little bit to turn it more quad dom to get vertical more. I'm cool with that. I'm like, all right, fine. Minute detail. No, I don't really care about that stuff. How quickly can they get it up, right? So when it comes to the dead clean specifically, because that's like where I start 101 on cleans, how quickly can they produce force down into the floor to get the hips through and up, right? So when I look at the clean specifically, in my mind, and this is just an arbitrary number, I'm looking at like a 75% lower body, 25% upper body, right? How much can you push through the floor, get the hips up and let the arms just go like, and you see that because you can realize we talk about the float in the swing, the float in the clean. There should be, and if you had the technology, and I wish I had the technology, and I've talked about this with multiple people, to like clock, right? So once the hips hit hip extension, there should be like a floating period of a couple milliseconds, who knows what it is, where the hands are just going like this, but the hips have done all the work they need to. And you see that. And those are the minute details. You see someone who kind of does it all in one to get it up. You see people who kind of there. And then you see people who are like so fast twitch. It's like, and so when it comes to just the dead clean 101, boom, moderate weight, right? Probably everyone's standard weight, 12, 16s, 20, 24s, whatever those are. Can I get them to a point of producing force and then making the clean looking okay? All right. But I guess the foundation to what I'm saying is producing force, right? How do you teach someone to produce force? That's the magic question, right? Like you take someone who has a normal job, who's sitting all day, but a typical client, right? How can you teach them to be essentially athletic, right? Teach them certain principles of bounding, maybe like absorbing force. You have to absorb force to be able to produce force. I think we all know that. Most people, most coaches I've seen skip that whole concept and they're just teaching the up, the up, the up, the up. And it's like, you're missing principles, you know? And so going back to your question with the clean, producing force. And how do I get to that? Well, it's not just with the bell, you know, you can use bands. You can use element of sprinting. You can use, there's so many things, right? I don't want to get too far off topic on that, but producing force on the clean. And when you take that little principle, you realize, oh shit, excuse me. I know you guys, we're cool. That's the swing. That's the snatch. That's the clean. I know last week, I forgot who we were talking with last week. Sokol was like, boom. But going back to the question, force, right? Force production is really what I'm looking for in the clean, right? And then there's the element of the art of the movement. How easy can you make the movement look, right? Are you this clean, and then up? We still got shit to work on. Okay. So.
Got it. Did you see what he just did, Susie? We were going back and forth with someone she was working with, trying to figure out, you know, why we had a little bit of chicken wing with the bell. And it really was just the stuff you were just talking about. He's probably not producing enough force, lower body, right clean, right shoulder way behind. Yeah. And then if the bell is coming back, he had to actually lift his arm. If this bell comes straight back, if you pull it, it's going to jam. So he had to actually put his arm out of the way and then catch it like.
So this whole distance here, oh wow.
Whole disconnect and then tries to catch it. So I'm like trying to break it down. He's still new to kettlebells and he's one of the guys that gets frustrated. So he sends me like the videos and stuff. He's in my beginners class. And we were talking about yesterday, you know, because you obviously have to keep that connection where I can't because the couch is behind me, where you're pulling back with the lat in order to catch, right? To redirect the belt and then get in the catch. But he would go back, arm goes out, then gets under. And it was a whole thing going on. So we were just breaking it down and trying to find things for him to, you know, clean that up and get him less frustrated. So, so when you did that, yeah.
Go ahead.
The whole thing was it was a reverse engineering process. It's like, okay, if he's doing this, if he's able to produce force, if he's able to produce this rotational force, and if he's able to move the bell that way, he had to have started he had to have started earlier. There's no way if you get your full force into the ground, you get knee extension, you get hip extension. There's no way as the bell's coming up, there's no way you can get that much torque on the bell and potentially doing, let's say, like a high pull or something like that. But that's going to start much farther out. Right. So I like what you're talking about, principles. When you have a principle-based approach, rather than, okay, a clean is supposed to look like this. You can do a lot more with the reverse engineering. You can do a lot more with drills, with coaching, figure out, it's almost like you're solving a little bit of a mystery. But when you have your principle-based approach, it's a lot easier to pick these things apart. A follow-up question I have for you, because you kind of opened it up. Where do you land on, the whole hip dominant, quad dominant? Do you have a bias? Are you looking for different things for different people?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. I think if I just want to learn kettlebells, so let's say, for instance, like strong first, boom, right, hard style, I think I would aim more hip dom. Now I'm starting to, or for a while, I've been loosening up my, how tight I was on that aspect to now going into more athletic development. So I'm transitioning my whole clientele from, people I have, but I really want to get into team sports, right? I'm a baseball player. Like my sister was a basketball player. Like, I think there's just an element of athletic training that we could all apply to this in some way, right? And so there's a team out here in the city, Reload Physical Therapy, Ryan Chow, good group for you guys to reach out to if you haven't. They're more into the quad dom vertical clean and stuff like that. And I love that. I think you don't really jump the way you deadlift. So it's more quad dom. I think we can all agree on that. And when you put it, again, certain context, right? In relation to jumping and sport, I'm perfectly fine with that. Can I get it up? Sure. Boom. So when it comes to the clean, absolutely more quad dom. I think with clients who it's easier to help relay positions, I have taught them hip dom all through. And then when I'm getting specific on days like, hey guys, we're going to jump today, we're bounding, like it's easier for me to like categorize things with certain clients. So it's not just this clusterfuck of ideas. I'm like, guys, we're bounding today. Remember that hip position? I want you guys to get there. And then let's just drop the hips a little bit and pull and pack and whatever the words are to get underneath, because this is the position we're really going to be in today. Some people might disagree. It's easier for clients to understand, okay, we're doing this. Okay, and this day we're doing this. But I've seen it help. I've seen the way these guys train their kids and they're teenagers, and I'm like, it's incredible. It's really, truly something astounding. And so I saw that, I'm like, I need to get into this and just understand their logic behind things. It's all contextual. We're all doing the same thing. It's just contextual. But I did want to kind of touch back on the note we were talking about with the clean, the single arm clean. Being that there's that skill element, right, of the actual one arm, there's a rotational aspect now. Holy God, how the hell is a class to get that up? What I've really what I've really kind of dropped that too is like teaching someone the goblet clean, right? So it's a very easy vertical, two hands, boom. It's a sagittal plane movement. They're going front to back, boom. And I think it's a really good position outside of the deadlift to teach someone, okay, their hands really don't have to do anything. Like if you pull it up, you're going to realize how much more work you have to do versus relying on the hips. And then I think even like the deadlift is good for like positioning for me, but it's really the goblet clean that I think is a money tool. You teach position, you teach hip extension, and you teach the least amount of work of the upper body, except for holding the thing in the position. And then I really think if they can understand that, like, boom, like rapid fire the hips forward, that presents now, okay, well, hey, you remember that feeling you did with the hips on the clean? Now we're just going to do it with a one arm, right? And then teaching, as we said, reverse engineering, maybe on the way up is too much. What if we just start them in the rack and say, hey, let's just go down? So again, we talk about absorbing force, boom, principles, athletic development, right into kettlebells. And it helps. And again, we all have an arsenal of tools. You pull it out of your pocket, like, I would have never thought that shit worked on them. But for some reason, it just clicked, So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, something I want to call out real quick, for people watching this and other coaches, is when you really listen to what you're saying, Rich, you have a principle based method of teaching. You're not one of these clipboard coaches that says, okay, let me check all the boxes. This is the standard. This has to work like this. You're never going to be a good coach if you just stay there. If you say this needs to look like X, Y, and Z, and then you're done, that's not, it's not how you work with people. When you figure out the principles, you're talking about the elements of position, about hip extension, creating trajectory through the lower body, minimizing the work with the upper body. These are all principle-based approaches. I just want to point out, in my opinion, which happens to be correct,
nearly half of
the principle approach works because it allows for context. It allows for, you can spend years and years coaching kettlebells a particular way. And when you're a principle-based coach, suddenly you work with, let's say, you've got to do some sports and conditioning or some strength and conditioning with a particular position who needs to be a little bit more vertical. Then suddenly you can take the same principles and adapt them. The context, principles and context work really well together. Whereas if you have like, this is the way it is, this is the way it's taught, no deviation, you're a bad coach.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to actually bring up something. I think this is pretty timely with what you're talking about, Rich. And that's like, a lot of times you get new people into kettlebells and we're always going to come across somebody that's new. And you talk about that force production and that power. What's like one of your go-to techniques or some you just go to, you're like, hey, this is what I want you to understand the power. Because I find a lot of times when people start, they're really hesitant on that hip drive, or they're hesitant on really like making it pop. And I'm just curious, like, what's something that you use, whether it's whatever, I don't know, I'll let you answer that.
Well, oftentimes even teaching the deadlift, like people will be, dumped forward in the pelvis, ribs flared up, like not even, again, understanding just what the stats, like, I don't want to go into too detail on that, but kind of what they need in the deadlift, right? Therefore, what you need to kind of get hip extension. Start them on the floor. So for me, 101, and again, you can have someone, hey, like, just show me what a deadlift is with, 24 kg, and it's just atrocious. Knees locked out, hips butt back, ribs flared. It's like, okay, like we need to start. So we start the pelvis and rib relationship. And that for me, going to like PRI stuff, 90-90. To me, it's just very safe, easy, ribs, exhalation, inhalation, pelvis, boom. Okay, maybe once you understand that for a couple rounds, we can apply that to like a hip bridge. Oh, okay. So you understand what it feels like for your pelvis to be here, your ribs to be here, for you to control inhalation and exhalation, and then kind of move your hips through space. And now your whole body moves, boom. And essentially this, if you just flip it the other way, is hip extension in the deadlift, right? So getting someone from the floor to standing, oftentimes it might take a while. And again, being in New York City, being with clients, sometimes you got to be quick with this stuff. So it might not be perfect the first time, but it's like, okay, I can, on the next session, I'll teach you more about breathing, right? Right now, they just want to move. I get it. But starting rib cage pelvis, hip extension from the floor, boom. Maybe from tall kneeling, right? I've seen, and it's another thing from the reload guys, teaching a tall kneeling hip drive with a med ball. So med ball into the wall. You guys know what I'm saying? And so that I'm starting to throw in, and I'm like, oh, okay. So instead of going right to that, maybe I try that. Okay, now we're going to stand, and now we're going to maybe deadlift. And world of a difference, but it's got to start there. Then we talk about force production. That's a bit of a deeper conversation where, people have to learn how to jump. You have to, prep them the right way. And then, but yeah, anyways, from the floor to the deadlift, to then just kind of making the deadlift quicker, right? People love competition. So, if you kind of create this internal thing in their mind, you're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think, how forceful do you think that was? People probably don't even know. So if you give them a number and you're like, oh, 6, you're like, fuck that, I'm gonna get an 8. Next thing you know, they're deadlifting a lot quicker than what they would have. People just need like a gauge, you know what I mean? And so going from the floor to, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. Sometimes visual cues, them seeing you move helps a lot. And then essentially just getting them on the bell and giving them a number and being like, all right, you feel that? Like, especially getting someone barefoot on the floor. I know we're all like, love the barefoot stuff, but they can kind of feel the vibration from their foot kind of making that contact. So now we're going to like some sensory stuff, but yeah, that's kind of how I normally take someone. If they're a seasoned athlete and they just need a few tweaks, it's a little different. Then I'd probably just go into just more technique stuff and then taking, hey, everything you know here, let's just apply it to like a different thing that you're not used to. And the next, you're still at the same outcome,
Cool. I like that. I like that med ball and that accelerating with the hinge. I think that's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's tough. What about what are you seeing right now that you can't quite figure out, or something that's kind of frustrating you in your training or training of some of your people?
With my people, in my personal training, it's figuring out the squat for me right now. I'm a heel lift. I have flattest of the flattest feet, no like stiffest ankles in the world. And for me right now, it's figuring out which variation of the squat just serves me best. I've been dealing with a back injury for a couple of years, but safety bar seems to do well. Sometimes it ain't. Sometimes front rack does better. I'm limited on weight, so therefore I have to just go reps, and that's like it's hit or miss. That's in my personal training. With my clients, funny enough, they were fantastic all winter long. I gave them my bells, and I was like, guys, we're gonna go virtual come wintertime. It was the middle of COVID, and they just like 3 days a week, 2 days, some 2 days, some 3 days. It's actually the way down on the clean. So everyone knows this is actually a big conversation, and oddly enough, I don't think enough people talk about it, and this kind of leads into the snatch as well. Everyone knows the way up on the clean, elbows pull back, boom. But then on the way down, they tend to just cast out. And so I am like, when we talk about the art of the clean, to me, that's like, when you see someone really do a beautiful clean, it's the same way up and it's the same way down. And so we're really looking for a disassociation of the shoulder, hit some extension, and off the people, there's some limitations. But the concept of just pulling back. So right now my clients, and it's gotten to the point where they're more obsessed with it than I am. So they'll like talk to me about it. But for them, it's really mastering the second half of the clean down. And it's good. It's all a work in progress. I mean, even since November, it's now June, is that 8 months straight of work, they still have something to work on,
Yeah.
That's kind of like, I love the long-term journey of this stuff because again, no one's done a perfect swing. No one's done a perfect clean, but we're all trying to achieve the same shit,
Do you have any like particular strategies to help them understand that way down in the clean? What types of things are you asking them to do or coaching them to do?
It's interesting. It's like a lot of, this is when I go back to like my baseball days of just like, it's a lot of just, why I'm afraid imagery. Again, we talk about the art, right? In my mind, it's holding the plank as best you can and trusting that the elbow can pull back without you being scared of anything, right? So I like close my eyes to picture that. And then there's this elbow extension or shoulder extension element, but then there's also this kind of loosening and unraveling of the bell simultaneously. So it's this here, it's this pull back, and it's this unraveling down to then pull and get here. And so teaching that, everyone again knows the way up, right? Because everyone can produce force up and pull back and it looks great, but on the way down gets stuck. So oftentimes imagery, ton of video, going behind them, and just like on the swing when you're taught at the start to put a clipboard behind, hey, hit the clipboard or hit the clipboard, same thing. Sometimes that may not help. Other times, as you said, specifically in videos, giving like a parallel line, like, hey, I want your hand to fall through this window. Or, for instance, one of my clients was a couple, so they had each other to look at, and I was telling them, like, I know you guys are gonna fight, but you got to hold each other accountable. So when one's going, make sure you have your hand back there. You know what I mean? Make sure you tell them, pull back a little bit more, or trust. So now my clients are starting to understand this unraveling piece, and we're just getting caught. Like it's like millimeters by millimeters, getting farther back, to the point where just like in a barbell, squat clean or like an Olympic clean, that bell is as close to your body as can be. And so with them, again, imagery, kind of recording and seeing, hey, am I staying within this window? A tactile cue, like using the hand, a clipboard. And then there's also the element of holding the plank and trusting that you can stay rigid and let your body, your arm disassociate from what everything else is going to do, right? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's kind of what's running through my head for that answer.
Yeah, that's pretty good. One of the things that we like to do when we teach that clean and making the space is more about still keeping, like you said, that rigidity in the body, because you don't want to be flopping around like a fish or anything. But we just teach a little bit of the movement through the ankles, so you get a little lean back to create the space, still keeping a connection with the arm, into the ribs and all that stuff, and then allowing that drop to happen. So that's a way to keep the space, without that whole, like you said, that disassociation, without that having to leave the arm from the body and stuff like that. So it's just interesting to hear some of the different things.
Yeah. Again, everyone's body is different. Everyone's arms are longer than the other. So as long as they're not fully stuck at like a 90-degree here, because again, if my chest is here, we have about, what is this? My forearm's probably like a foot. So here, I try to get here. That's good. Because again, the bell is hooked onto this, so the bell's out here. I try to get everyone about right here. And if you can get more and more, fantastic. Right? And so,
or specifically with your position.
Say that one more time.
What are you looking for specifically with your position? So why or I've got ideas. Why do you want the arm? Why do you want the arm roughly there? Why do you want it closer?
Because on the way up, it's the same, right? So when you're going up, everyone can get a really good pull back. I mean, it's crazy the extension they could find on the way up, but for some reason finding it on the way down, there's a disconnect, right? And so again, when you look, like, let's say, imagine like a barbell clean, like an elite CrossFitter, right? The way they cycle a barbell is gorgeous. I mean, it's as close to the body. It's the fastest. Yeah, some people might be taller than the other, so therefore it's going quicker, but it's just. So I take that same understanding and I'm like, okay, if they're going to move 135 pounds in space that quickly because simply keeping the bar close, then in my mind, I can do that with a kettlebell and it's going to move as efficient as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Efficiency, we're getting into bell path, we're getting into things like that.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bell path. I mean, it's, yeah. And then oftentimes though, the same, like I get caught up in this, is that they'll do that so well, but then the timing aspect is now off. So I've kind of created another monster that I have to attack by being so meticulous sometimes. So there's a fine line of like, am I hindering them or am I kind of doing something, you know what I mean? Doing something good. And bell path and timing are kind of often the two things that either hit or miss or work really well with each other in the clean. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would argue that especially in your ballistic skills, if you can get the timing down, if you can get the bell path down, I mean, there's not much else to do.
Like 100%.
You're golden. Everyone's happy.
100%.
So those are huge things. What about are there any things in particular about kettlebell training, the way it's done? Anything that drives you nuts, anything you don't like, cues that you hear that you wish would die, stuff that just drives you crazy.
Yeah. We're gonna get into that.
Yep.
It's the lat talk. It's the lat talk. And it's specifically the lats. So that was actually, when I got into kettlebells, lats. I'm like, okay, cool. Holy shit. I had no idea how important this shit was. Cool. Bang. When you're talking about a sagittal plane movement and you're really trying to crank the lat for whatever reason in the deadlift, when it comes to powerlifting and sport, or like powerlifting specifically, 100%. Leverage, get compression in the back, wedge the shit out of that. You're lifting powerlifting weight. You're talking about a kettlebell that's about 100 pounds, maybe $120, maybe. So the same idea, sure. However, then you go back to the principles, right? My principles lie in what should we be feeling in each plane of motion. And kettlebells is mainly, there's some rotation element, mainly when it comes from hip down is sagittal plane, right? Hip flexion to extension, okay? So when it comes to the deadlift, like I don't really teach that external rotation, that rooting of the feet, putting the arch, it's relatively wide. knees tracking over toes, finding your hamstrings in the hip hinge. Again, going back to the floor, right? The 90-90. Do I have abs? Do I have a solid relationship between pelvis and rib cage? Can I find hamstrings on my hinge? And arms straight down. In that position, you're biasing abs and you're biasing hamstrings. Lats don't necessarily play. If you do crank the lats and get the torque back, you're going to pull the rib cage and the pelvis into this anterior and this flared position up front. Now, people will start their swing that way, and oftentimes in their swing, they'll end up looking like this, where there's this curvature back here, which is normal curvature, but you're focused on this lats right here that I've got no abs and I've got to dump pelvis forward. You can say, hey, start off here and go, but the moment you try to get those lats in, the lats are gonna win. They're gonna pull, they're gonna compress the back of your rib cage into flaring the front. And therefore you've lost abs and you've lost the sagittal plane competency that we like to talk about in kind of the training world. And so not that it's not important, you need to bias it certain times, but I think for someone who's teaching them how to deadlift and swing, I don't really think that that's necessary. There's nothing wrong with it, but you also can't say crank the lats, find the abs, posterior tilt the pelvis, find hamstrings in a relatively concentric eccentric orientation. It's like some's got to give, you know.
So let's keep going, because I think this is useful. We agree with you a lot. You just said that it's not that there's something wrong with that. I do think that there's something wrong with a lot of the use of lat. I think the biggest problem is it's a complex muscle, and there's no real differentiation between how to use it. And generally when you get into default lat work, it becomes an extensor. So, when you look at the attachment of the muscle, from the humerus down into the thoracolumbar fascia, there is a direct, for those of you who are comfortable with the terms nutation and counter-nutation, there's a direct tie-in with the lat. When you tension the lat too much, the sacrum will nutate. It'll come forward. And you've got this entire anterior orientation of the pelvis. The problem with that, especially when you're going through a movement at high velocity, is you're stealing your hip flexion. And from standing, you're already beginning to flex your hip, which means when you get back down into that loading phase, we call it. We don't generally talk hinge because it may be more hip dominant, maybe more quad dominant, just based on individual anthropometrics. But when you go into that loading phase, if your lats are already on, you're missing out on tons of elasticity. You're pre-stretching everything from the heels all the way up to the back of the neck. You're not allowing your sacrum to counter-nutate. You're missing out on hip flexion. Therefore, your hip extension, which is the thing that you're claiming that you want to train in a powerful way, you can't train. You're losing position from the very beginning of the movement. And if you're going to talk about lat, look, the lat connects the upper body and the lower body. It's an important muscle. But you can talk about adduction of the shoulder, for example, to integrate the humerus into the trunk. I'm good with that. But when you just say lat and you got some joker sticking his or her chest out, then we run into trouble. Then your cues actually are no longer productive. They're actually taking away the thing that you're allegedly giving somebody. So, I think that you need to be meaner about this, Rich.
Yeah.
I think
you need to New York their asses.
I think it's a very relevant point.
I think real quick, I think something that I think why people are always like lats, because it's tangible. Like somebody that doesn't understand to have like what you say, when you say you have that connection with the ribs and the pelvis and you get that core connection, you can develop that sense of tension, right? That you need to be stable for any of these ballistic kettlebell moves or whatever the move is. But people are like, oh, well, just get your lats on. So now you automatically feel like you're tighter up in your upper body. So you feel like you're stronger, but you're missing out on like all that sciencey jargon that Roger just dumped into our brains, But I think that's like the main cop out for, I guess, lack of experience in coaching or understanding of the body and stuff like that. And, you know, I've been guilty of it in the past. You know, I'll only admit it here. But, you know.
We all have. And it gets to a point where you just, you know, I was actually thinking about this yesterday. It's like, at some point, everyone has this epiphany of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, do I have a set of principles from A, B, you know, like, again, we all have principles from here to deadlift to clean to snatch, whatever it is, right? And it's also, for me, in athletic development, right? For some people in proper strength training, like there's always a set of principles. And if you don't have a set of principles, at least to guide you in some regard, then you're lost puppy. And I noticed that a ton. I'm young. I've been in the game 4 or 5 years, and I've seen some shit. And I'm like, you guys don't even know your why. And these people have, I don't know, tons of clients, and they're just putting it out, and it's just like, fuck, like you don't know anything, and you are teaching people that don't know anything, nothing. And it's just unfortunate that, you know, more people aren't questioning their why. You know, they're just following this rule book that they were given a certification, 3 letters. Fuck that. I'd rather a conversation like this any day where we question ideas than, you know, someone just putting the hammer down on lats.
Yeah. Something to talk about, we remind people, your certification is your bare minimum entry level. Your certification gives you the right to walk through the door. That is all a certification does. It doesn't mean you know what you're doing. It doesn't mean you know how to teach. It doesn't even mean you know kettlebells. It just gives you the right to start having a conversation sometimes.
Yeah, you might have got information from people that know a bit more or whatever. I mean, I think, honestly, I mean, we both done the SFGs and, you know, there's people that really didn't have a business doing it, you know, or getting to where they needed to get to. For whatever reason, I don't really know what their motives were behind it. So I don't want to say that they were all going to be coaches. Maybe they just wanted a challenge. But Roger posed kind of an interesting question to me before this. And I think you started to get into it a little bit. You know, there's a lot of that old, that find the standard in the book, and this is that, and these are our things. And you maybe articulate this a little bit better, but you started to touch on like, the why are you even doing this? Why are you even knowing that? Are these things that you're conveying to your students or other coaches and peers that you're talking with, you know, whatever the case may be? Like, are you discussing the whys? And if so, like, what are some of your big whys when you go into some of these kettlebell skills?
When at first, I think to claim some of my clients' attentions, it's just like, let's get moving, let's get it. And then you realize how in-depth this stuff is, right? And I have some clients who don't care. And I'm like, and I don't even go into that depth, but I have a handful that are like, they want to know, they want to move. Hey, why do I feel better when I do something than this? Like, or, you know, and they unintentionally ask themselves that question, or like, you know, verbalize that question. They're like, oh shit, I'm questioning something on a deeper level. And, you know, training for some people might mean more than others, right? It could be spiritual to that, whatever, however deep they want to go. But for some of my clients, they get to a point where they're like, why am I not progressing? Well, to be fair, we kind of cut some corners because I didn't want to lose you by going too in depth. And they're like, no. Well, let's go back to that because I want to get better. Now we're focused on the why. Okay. So they want to move better, right? They want to get stronger. They see, again, I've got a ton of weights. They see some of the, you know, especially some of my females, they see the weights and they're like, fuck, I want to lift that one. Like it's only 8 pounds more. Well, what's going to take to get to that, you know? So then that's when you really root into your principles and you're like, we're going to work this one thing for a couple sessions. Don't get mad at me. We're just going to work. You know what I mean? The same with my guys. It's the same thing with the guys. You know, we're going to work and work and work. So I think when it comes to clients, I think it's sometimes can be their limitation. So they hit a limitation. They're like, damn, why am I not better? And it's those little details. And, you know, that principle, again, of little details, that goes across everything. You know what I mean? Not to get too philosophical.
What about coaching? It's something I did before you move on. Touch on this real quick because you said, you know, sometimes you just put people and they just go through and you don't really explain the why. Do you find that maybe going forward as you've had these conversations with them and they're like, I really want to know the why, would you incorporate into your set of principles where like, hey, if you're training with Rich, you're going to understand the why and we're going to start and you're going to understand it because I believe that this is a better way. and like cut out any of these time for shortcuts? Do you think that's something that you as a coach, and like you said, you said you're fairly new to this, and I think we're all just a beginner's mind away from everything, right? So like something you might change about your principles is like, instead of just getting somebody through because of fear of losing them, you treat them like somebody that you want to mold into somebody that understands and like enforce the why and understanding what they're doing. Do you think that's something that would go forward?
Yeah, I think inherently I give off that energy. And I think, for some people looking at my page and kind of seeing who I train with, like I train with people who care about their craft. And why do they care? It's because they've worked on everything. They understand, like the same conversation we're having right now. Like you just have with people at lunch in the industry, and you can tell where someone's mindset is, So I inherently go into sessions with that mindset. It is New York City. And I think this is where you step out of like the trainer's mindset, or like, this specificity of what we're doing. You're like, all right, sometimes you just got to get a client through. Sometimes they really don't care. They want to move, which means certain kettlebell skills, great for moving, but do they really care about the technique and stuff like that to the extent that I would want them to? Majority, yeah. Other times, not really. Okay. And that's kind of really what I meant by that. It's just there's that small population of clients who just like teach them to clean. They look great. They get a little pop. They feel good. A little sweat, swing. You know what I mean? And they still move well, but they're not to that like culty aspect that we all love and like really hope for sometimes.
Cool. I can dig it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Roger's got some.
Talk to me.
Probably the last question we'll have time for. We're not in a hurry, so we'll talk as long as you want. But last week you were on. We had Jeff Sokol on here. You seemed pretty excited to talk to him and hear what he had. No worries. He's a guy who has a lot to offer, a lot of knowledge. He's been in the industry a long time. What do you have to bring to the table? What do you have to offer? There's a reason. We know what those reasons are. There's a reason why we invited you on here. There's a reason why, we went through, and I actually found your profile first. There are things that brought our interest in you. What do you think those are? What do you have to add to the game that someone like him hasn't thought of or hasn't articulated? What's better? What's different? What do you have to offer to progress this thing?
I think it's a fresh set of eyes. I think in a day and age where there's so many seminars, so many things you can learn and pick from, right? To stick in a bubble is probably your strength, your greatest strength, but it's also your greatest weakness, right? So if you're not versatile in multiple ideas, models, teachings, then you've lost. You're out of the game. It's just a matter of time before the new cat comes in. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I think I come from a multitude of facets where I'm like, oh, okay, I've had some success. I've had failures. I'm sure we all have. But if we're talking about kettlebells, I think coming in with a fresh set of eyes, with a fresh set of principles, and understanding really what the hell are we doing and how many different ways can we come from to produce the same outcome, right? So when I look at kettlebell skill, I'm not only looking at it from a force production side. I think there's a beauty, as I was kind of, there's an art to this. Like there's legitimately an art to this. And so if you can make something look really good while doing it, I think you understand something that someone else doesn't. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think, again, a fresh set of eyes. Like you look at the same thing, someone could look at the same painting and see two different things. And I think that's how I'm coming into this. Like we all know the cues, we're all taught at the certification stuff, and those are great. Those work up until 2020 or like this day and age where now you have the ability to kind of, bring some swag, bring some different principles to this shit. Like you're all doing the same thing. No one's ever going to get hurt. No one's ever going to be led the wrong way. But there's a certain generation gap between those who are running the certs and those who are coming into it. And I mean that with all respect to all the OGs, but like it's just a different swag coming up, And like my girlfriend Samantha, SCIC on Instagram, like she's amassed a following on Instagram purely because of her breakdowns on stuff, on technique and stuff, and a way to visualize technique that no one has done on Instagram. And she puts a ton of work into that. And I'm referencing her. She's not here. I'm just referencing her because that's like that new age where you go to a certification and you're paying $1,000 and you're not going to get half of the shit if you just stood at home for an hour and looked through her Instagram. And that's free content. You know what I mean? And so to answer your question, Roger, I think just what I bring is a set of eyes. A set of eyes coming with fresh eyes, some swag, some cool energy, not this militarized wearing a tucked in t-shirt and pants. Even though I love that stuff at certifications, I do. It's just, yo, like, let's loosen up. It's kettlebells, baby. Like, let's get powerful. Let's have some fun. You know what I mean? And it's just addicting. The energy is just addicting. So,
are you going on the record saying you're cooler than Sokol?
Hell no. That man's twice as strong as I am. Hell no. Hell no. No, we're all products of those who came before, right? So for me, even though Phil's no longer in SFG, he's doing his own thing. Like, learning from Phil was one of the best things I could have done that weekend. The man is brilliant. I wish I could have learned from so many more. But again, like, you take certain principles. There's still certain principles I take from Phil. I'm like, yeah, that's not mine. That's his. Like his new behind the heel start swing. I fucking love that. Love that shit. But you just add your flair to it, and it's different.
I got a follow-up question for you. It's based on part of your answer. Do you think either cues or semi-established teaching methods stop being effective over time?
At some point, you need to say the same thing in a different way. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Sure. I mean, that's what.
Yeah. So there are times where I'm a broken record and I catch myself and I'm like, dude, this is not working. Throw it away. Or at least for this person, throw it away. And then again, same thing, different verbiage, light bulb. And so, again, having multiple like models where you've learned from, people you've heard, and you're like, holy crap, like that makes perfect sense. You know, I have a really good analogy for this, or kind of illustration. I was at the barber last week, and my barber was talking about things, and he was referencing a barber, another chair, and he's like, yo, this new cat, he's been using new words to kind of say the same thing. So you know how normally you're like, oh, like light on the sides or whatever. He's like, you want me to like crop the top a little bit, or, you know, dust the top off for you? And it's like, this person's just like knows what he's talking about. And then the clients are always like, oh yeah, like I want to be dusted. Like just take a little bit off the top, clean it off. Like it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's so crazy. So someone might not know one thing, but they'll know another. I guess that's kind of my answer to that, Raj.
Why did you have to use?
Say that one more time.
Hair analogy. I don't understand what you're talking about. Look,
I plead the fifth on that one, dog.
I think it's a really solid point. This is stuff that we actually talk about a lot, especially when we're working with people, with other coaches. That's really what we love doing. We have this idea of what I call a back formation. And I think that people successful in kettlebells who have already mastered a skill, figured it out, they have a different perspective than a beginner. And rather than getting into the beginner's mind and saying, what do I need to teach this person to get this skill? They start from the other end of the process. And they start from having already mastered, and you get some of these cues that they think work because they make sense to them, but they make sense to them after already having gone through thousands of repetitions. And I think a lot of the cues that we use are endorsed by coaches, because you have a coach who made this shit up, and then you have another who's already done 1,000 cleans or whatever, 10,000 cleans. Like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But you have this person over here, like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? You know, and I that's really my take on the whole fresh perspective is understanding that teaching does require context. That, it's great to have a method, it's great to have a process, it's great to have checkpoints, but the difference between, a principle-based approach is you don't really care how you get from point A to point B, as long as you get there. That when you have this kind of classical structure, this is how we teach cleans. If you were to ask us, like, how do you teach a swing? I don't know. I usually start with like, hey, you know how to swing a kettlebell? Yeah, kind of. Okay, do it. And then I wait. I see what happens. Like, shit breaks. Like, okay, well, you clearly don't know how to swing a kettlebell. So
why did you lie?
There's some checkpoint. And where I dive in is going to be a completely different place, depending upon what people know. And I've found that a lot of people who have, let's say, I teach very little deadlift when it comes to the swing. The only reason I teach the deadlift is to make sure that they can move through their hips without moving through their spine. Can they find position? If they can find position, cool. Other than that, with my experience, the deadlift just confuses people. So I like to make sure they establish position, and then we do a lot of jumping, or we do a lot of like, hey, let's go ahead and teach you how to produce force. I will teach the hike for the swing probably after someone has been swinging successfully after like a month and a half. I don't care about the hike. Like, it's not important. Like, stand up safely, deadlift your kettlebell, and then start swinging it. But the point is, before I get too far off topic, is the teaching will conform to the situation. And I think that a lot of when you get these established principles, the teaching becomes the way. And it's you lose track of what you're actually doing, who you're actually teaching. So I think having that fresh perspective is important. Not that you need to reinvent the wheel, but like Jeremiah was saying, if you didn't reinvent the wheel, we'd still be rolling around on wood or stone or something.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need.
You gotta bring in that swag. You know what I'm saying? We're like, so I don't know how much swag we're, but
you guys got some swag. I like the Cali energy you're bringing. I really do. Come on, man.
Before we wrap this up, I want everybody's been here listening for a little bit. Does anybody have any questions they got for Rich on anything he's talked about or anything in general? Could be anything. Really, where his barber is located, all that stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm just going to try actually your drop down method with the clean. I haven't really broken it down to that because I tend to teach the lean slightly, but I'm gonna try that reverse kind of as I drop down with the elbow. I have to admit, I've never tried it that way. I do focus on keeping the elbow close to the rib cage on the drop down, but I do teach the lean to clear the body out the way to get that back swing. So yeah, I like that.
Okay.
And I know SoCal was doing it also on one of his videos with the clean, like hip, what does he call it? Hike, hip, rack or something like that. So he does what you were talking about, the pull back with the elbow before dropping back into the backswing. So yeah.
I mean, again, you can see a lot of people have that side profile, and if it goes up one way, it has the potential, you can't say always, to go down the same way.
Yeah.
Especially in a dead clean, as stationary as the dead clean is, it'll often go down that way. All right. I look forward.
Yeah, I remember Hunter.
I don't know if it will, but
I'm gonna try it out. I know Hunter was. I'm gonna try it. I always definitely like to try different things, and if I can coach it and see results with my clients doing it that way, like I'm always up to learning new things. So, and I know Hunter's the whole sports related kind of like when you come down into that drop from the rack position, kind of like smoothly decelerating before setting it down. I know that was a big thing he was teaching that time when we were at Sunday Swing. So because people were just kind of setting it down between their ankles, but it was just like that decelerate, then park the bell down kind of thing. So I remember that. It's
really impressive when you see people drop, like, especially they go up quickly to come down and drop on a dime like that. And the bell's hovering over the floor an inch. Yeah. And then you reset, and then like the movement ends. Then, like that to me was what I learned from him and Reload. And I was like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I ever do that?
Yeah, I learned that from him that day, the day that I was there. And I like that.
That's
because
awesome.
Otherwise people just kind of just drop it. And it's like, no,
absolutely.
Drop it with like style. Yeah. So.
See, there we go. I already got Susie
with
on
finesse.
Yeah,
with finesse. There we go. So that's
awesome.
That's all I got. But yeah, it was super nice talking to you and getting to know you. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Likewise. All right, team.
All right. Cool.
Anybody else?
Okay. Guys, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it was a pleasure last week talking with you guys, this week as well. I'm gonna join. That's it. I'm gonna be on it. I like this community we're building. You guys are cool as hell. I like that it's East Coast, West Coast. We're just kind of bringing the swag, bringing the style back, and I appreciate the friendship. I can't wait to meet everybody in person one day. But until then, you guys are awesome. I'm glad we're all connected.
Appreciate it too, brother.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking the time, bro.
Always, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.